one thing with thinking about democracy and how bizarre it is that it's just become synonymous with legitimacy is this means if we're in a room of 500 people and uh you know 251 have very, very strong views and vote on this, uh and 249 have very, very strong views and hate that, that's automatically somehow legitimate because there was that one person who
Right.
moved the side over.
And we shouldn't, yeah, I mean, as Milton Friedman said, if 51% of people vote to shoot the other 49%,
Right, exactly.
that's hardly legitimate.
Right.
But I think it shouldn't be underestimated how important the the point that you made about democracy being seen as the same as legitimacy is. I mean, we can see it now in in regard to the conflict in Ukraine. I Russia is seen as its actions on the world stage are seen as less legitimate than the actions of the United States, a democracy, even though they've been quite similar. I.e., Russia has illegally invaded Ukraine, US has illegally invaded Iraq. I think part of
You're
the
just
reason for
you're provoking me. You're trying
well,
to provoke.
I'm not trying to suggest that one should have a particular view about
No, no, yeah, I got
either of
you.
those wars. I'm just
Right.
suggesting that they're treated differently because of the, at
Yeah.
least in part, it's not the only
Yes.
reason, because the US is a democracy and therefore what it does is more legitimate than what Russia
Yeah.
does.
It's interesting because there's long been a view, certainly many of the founders of the United States had this view that rapacity in the global, on the global stage, as it were, was caused by the singular like deformations and greed of a particular person, King George III, let's say, and that republics wouldn't behave that way. And in fact, there are many people make arguments. You've heard the platitude by now, democracies don't go to war with democracies, right? There is this view that democracies behave more humanely in foreign affairs than do dictatorships. I think you're very skeptical of that view. Uh, but what
Well,
you're point,
it seems that they do generally, with the massive exception of the United States. So, which
we
reminds
have
me
to
of,
protect global hegemony, so
no,
that I
no,
would put us in a
yeah,
different
I'm not
category.
taking a view on whether the United
Sure.
States foreign policy is
Right.
favorable or not.
Right.
But it's like it reminds me of this statement from Nassim Taleb that you can't say he was an excellent student apart from the school shooting. You know, like democracies don't go to war, except the United States, which goes to war all the time.
Right. Yeah. It is interesting. It is, I mean, this is something that realists would argue that there really isn't much of a difference, right?
I mean,
I
of
mean,
course, the statement is that they don't go to war with each other, so
yes,
you
exactly.
have to be a little bit careful
Yeah.
here. Yeah,
But the point that you're
but
making
the
is
US
that,
doesn't go to war with its allies is hardly surprising.
right. I agree with that. Um, but yeah, so yeah, to conclude, societies need some kind of governments need some kind of legitimation and legitimizing narrative. And it seems to me the one that we've hit upon in the United States and probably across the West more broadly is democracy. So everything's democracy, democracy, democracy. And one of the challenges of this is that there are institutions that were created by in Europe, it's more of a organic process, but in the United States, by the founders that are explicitly anti-democratic, and it's really difficult to defend those when the legitimizing narrative is everything should be democratic. So, to take a specific example, the Supreme Court, you have nine judges who are determining if a law is constitutional. And what people will often say is, we shouldn't let nine unelected judges determine the law or whatever,
Yeah.
right? So this does seem to me like an important tension now. And that's why I actually think it's important to defend republicanism and the virtues of republicanism as opposed to democracy, because democracy will will automatic like the majority of people will often want things that our system was actually designed from preventing them from getting.